I've known you for a long time, and I was thinking one of the biggest changes that I've seen in you as a person came when you got your dog. And I remember you approached it in very Tim Ferriss fashion. You didn't just like, hey, I got a goat one day because we saw it on Craigslist, and we just like went and got it. But that's not like the Tim Ferriss way.
Yeah.
You talked to a bunch of people, you read a bunch of books, but you ultimately end up, was it 10 years ago you got a dog?
4.5 years ago.
Okay,
maybe 5.
But it's been an interesting pivot in your life. Why do you think it impacted you so much?
I think that there are a few aspects to it. Number one is caring for a puppy, at least if you do it well, takes your attention outside of any type of self-indulgent reflection / obsessive compulsive rumination.
Sure.
And as someone who has had a history of depression, which is being stuck in the past, and I think being highly self-referential. I mean, depression is, I think, as someone who's experienced it a lot in life, very self-obsessive. Right?
Yeah.
So when you have something in front of you that requires and demands care, or it's going to pee on your carpet every 2.5 hours, like Molly, my dog, it's incredibly antidepressive in that sense because it forces a complete refocus. I also, I think, realized very quickly how absurd some of my reactions are to things, or have been historically, in the sense that if you have a problem at work, you have a problem with your partner, your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, you can get upset and create an imaginary agenda that they have where they deliberately did A, B, or C to upset you.
Sure.
But with a dog, that's completely absurd. Like at face value, it's completely absurd, right? So
all the problems are your fault.
It's your fault, right? So if your dog chews on your shoes, that's your fault. It's a dog, and you left your shoes out, right? So a big part of, I think, raising a puppy well is making it extremely difficult to make mistakes that then become habits, right? That's an approach, or at least a lens through which you can look at raising a puppy. And if you don't want your dog to develop a taste for chewing on shoes, don't leave your shoes out.
Right.
Put them on something or in something that makes that impossible. And similarly, peeing in the house. To avoid that, use something like crate training. And so I think that when I became, particularly in the early periods of training Molly, upset because she wouldn't follow my instructions.
Yeah.
After an initial period of just getting upset, which I think was my default and has been a default for a long time, anger has been a go-to emotion, which I think Krista Tippett once said it's fear shown in public or something like that, which I tend to agree with on some level.
Getting upset is fear shown in public?
Getting angry.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a coping mechanism. Some people shut down. Right. Some people learn to get angry. I learned to get angry, like when I was little. So doing that, though, with this dog who does not speak English was so ridiculous and ineffective that I had to resort to doing other things that, lo and behold, translate to other people and even to yourself, like positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't, through sports and coaching and teaching or receiving teaching, had a little bit of positive reinforcement, but not a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to go without it, even though that is unhealthy.
Sure.
And reading about animal training, if you really want to take it seriously, if you look at, say, training marine mammals like dolphins, you can't get pissed and hit it with a rolled up newspaper. It doesn't work underwater, and they're faster than you are. So you have to figure out how to use like whistles and different clickers and means of marking the desired behavior and then rewarding.
Sure.
And getting into the habit of providing positive reinforcement, I think, led to me doing that more. I could still do it more with other people. And like how you treat other people, I think, impacts how you treat yourself and relate to yourself. So I think that those are all pieces of the puzzle. And then last but not least, feeling unconditional love, although granted, giving your dog food and treats helps a lot.
Yeah.
But feeling this love from an animal and experiencing that in the absence of language, I think is really powerful.
Yeah.
As someone who tends to get tangled in their own inner voice in the form of language, to experience that type of deep, positive emotion and connection without language to trip over has been really impactful for me.
Do you think it was sort of giving you something to care about, like to be responsible for, that wasn't, there's no reason to have the dog. Like, you have the dog because you love the dog. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not getting anything out of it in the sense of, like, sure, you have a nice car, you have to take care of the nice car, but you know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, you get a dog because you want a dog. It's, in a sense, a very selfish act.
Yeah.
Even though you can adopt and do all these other things, as I did with Molly, that one would hope have some positive karmic impact, but ultimately you are choosing to have a dog.
Right.
Similarly, I think having kids is, and this isn't a bad thing, it's not a value judgment, but like, it is a selfish decision. Like, you have kids because you want to have kids, right?
Yeah.
And I remember Mike Maples, who's this very well-known investor and friend of mine, said to me, he's like, rule number one with kids is, like, they owe you nothing. Like, their job is to receive love, not to give you love.
Yeah.
Because you decided to have the kids.
Right.
And I think that's true with dogs as well, or any type of pet. And for that reason, I do not recommend that everybody get dogs, right? Because I think that for a lot of folks, as I felt for a really long time, I was too sort of self-focused / obsessed. And the only way I could see having a dog was to kind of wedge it into the open spaces that were left over once I had already executed on everything else I wanted to execute on or fixate on. And when I ended up getting Molly, I made the decision that I was going to actually reverse that and get Molly, prioritize really taking good care of her, and then fit everything else around the dog.
Right.
And those are two fundamentally different ways to look at it. And I think if you look at sort of the realm of behavior in humans and dogs, like, most animals, including humans, are poorly trained.
Yeah.
And to do it well takes a lot of effort and consistency. So if someone's ready for that, then I suggest, adopting ideally. But otherwise, I've seen people who get dogs and then just neglect them.
Sure.
And I'm conflicted as to how to feel about that, because on one hand, if they're rescuing a dog from a kill shelter,
probably better. Yes.
Probably better. One could argue that's better. But I don't know. I'm not, I'm no professional ethicist, so.
No, there's a thing David Brooks talks about. When his son was born, someone sent him an email and said, this is his first kid, they said, like, welcome to unavoidable reality. And the idea being that up until then, sure, you have responsibilities with work and life, but, like, pretty much anything you don't want to have to put up with, you don't have to put up with.
Right. Yeah.
But as soon as you take on something like that, like with a kid, it's like, you think, okay, I'm going to go to this thing at 1 o'clock. But if your kid falls asleep at 12:59, you're going to the thing when your kid wakes up. Yep. And I think dogs have an element of that too. Suddenly you're responsible for this thing that is totally dependent on you.
No.
And the dog decides what the schedule is, not you, which, if you're successful or self-absorbed, and they're kind of the same thing in different ways, it forces you to pivot your reality in a way that makes you a better person, I think.
I think so. And you develop, I don't really want to use the word patience. I think it's something else, maybe greater self-awareness and resilience in the face of the unpredictable.
Equanimity is what I think
equanimity,
it is. Yeah,
equanimity we could use. Because it's like, all right, Molly gets sick. I'll give you an example. Like, I remember one morning I woke up to the most awful stench imaginable at like 4 a.m.
Right.
And I'm very protective of my sleep. Historically, they're like one of the best ways to get me really spun up and upset is to, like, negatively affect my sleep.
Okay.
And it's like 4 a.m, went to bed at 1.
Yeah.
And it's the most horrible stench you can imagine. I wake up, I turn the light, and Molly has just shit everywhere in the bedroom, including on the wall, which I thought was very impressive. I'm like,
of course,
what possesses the dog to shit against the wall? I don't know. nonetheless, it's like, all right, this is what you're dealing with for the
It's
next
unavoidable reality.
hour, 2 hours, is
Right.
putting on your hazmat gear and dealing with this. And I think you develop, or I have developed to some extent, I don't think I'm the best at this, but the ability to put myself in other people's shoes.
Sure.
Because in a situation like that, it's clear to me Molly doesn't want to do what she's doing.
Right.
There's something.
She did not do this to ruin your sleep.
She did not do it to ruin my sleep, and it's not just unhelpful, but it's damaging to lose your. I was going to say lose your shit,
Sure.
but to get really upset in a situation like that, it actually makes it harder to train your dog effectively.